podcast, I'm going to show you how to make scatter plots in Excel. These are good ways to visualize data. In a scatter plot, we have an independent variable. A lot of times we call that X, that kind of goes on this horizontal axis. And then we have the dependent variable. Oftentimes we call this Y, that goes on the vertical axis. The dependent variable is some sort of property or variable that depends upon the independent variable. Scatter plots are generally used for time series data, so a lot of times the independent variable is time. We use this for continuous, non-categorical data. You wouldn't want to use this for situations in which the independent variable is categorical data. Scatter plots show correlations between two variables. The important thing about scatter plots is that you have paired data. So in this example up here, each one of these markers represents a pair of independent variable value and dependent variable value. So the data is paired. An example of this would be high temperature as a function of the date. Each of those dates has a high temperature, so we have paired data. We can add multiple series on a single plot. This red line here is a series. This is the high temperature. But maybe we wanted to add in the low temperature. In order to add in multiple series onto the same plot, the X and Y values have to represent the same variable. They can be different, for example, high temperature and low temperature, but they are both temperatures. The multiple series are distinguished from each other using a legend. An example of this, as I just alluded to, would be now instead of having the y-axis labeled high temperature, it's just labeled temperature, and now we can put two series in here, one for the high temperature and one for the low temperature as a function of the date. Sometimes you want to add in another set of data, so maybe we have precipitation as a function of date. Precipitation is not the same in nature, it's not the same as a temperature. In that case, we would put precipitation on a secondary axis. The temperature scale would have its different values here, maybe ranging from 20 degrees up to 70 degrees Fahrenheit or so. And precipitation then would be in measures of, we would have different markers here, so a different scale here on the secondary axis corresponding to precipitation. So now I'm going to show you how we can create these scatter plots in Excel. So I've got a file here called dairy products. As a function of the year, we have the per capita consumption of American cheese, ice cream, yogurt, and butter. We also have in a column over here, completely unrelated, we have still as a function of time, we have the milk per cow that's produced in the United States, an average in pounds per year. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a simple scatter plot for American cheese consumption as a function of the date, the year. So I can select these two, this first row, Control-Shift down to select the entire series. And then we go up here to Insert, and I'm going to go over here to the Charts group. There's all sorts of different options. A lot of times the recommended charts will show you a recommended one. What I like to do is I like to just kind of build it from scratch, and I know that this is going to be a scatter with smooth lines and markers, so I'm just going to go ahead and click that. There are other options that you can play around with, and there is our chart. I'm going to go ahead and move this up to the top. I like to remove the title because a lot of times that information is redundant because it's already on the axes, or you have it in a figure caption if you're putting this in a paper or a presentation. That's our series. We can always left click on the chart. Up here we can add chart elements with this plus sign. Alternatively, you can go up here to the chart design, and that tab is up if we selected that chart. And we can go over here to add chart element, and you can select from a bunch of different things. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to add in some titles. I like to do that with this plus sign over here. So plus axis titles, and now we've got our axis titles. To change the axis titles, you can just click on one of those and we can start typing this in. You notice that when I typed in, it's up here in the formula bar. I just typed in year, but it's not yet showing down here in the axis title until I press enter. So that's how we can change that to year. I'm going to change the y-axis title to consumption in pound per person per year, and I press enter, and we've labeled that axis. So this would be a nice scatter plot. You notice that we're only using the upper half of this scatter plot. You can change the scale here. Maybe we want this to start at 8 instead of 0. You can right click on that, and we go to format axis. And this is where you can change a lot of the options with the axis. So I'm going to put in 8, press enter, and it's rescaled that axis. You can change the series. You can right click on here, and we go to select data, and it brings up the select data source. This is where we can edit this and we can name the series. So maybe this first one I wanted to name American cheese. That's how we can make a name for it. But this is where you can change the X and Y values that series corresponds to. What I'm now going to do is add a couple of series. We're going to add in ice cream, yogurt, and butter. Because ice cream, yogurt, and butter in the data here also is in per capita consumption in pounds per person per year, I can use it on the same primary axis. The first way to add a series to a scatter plot is you can right click, and like I mentioned before, you can go to select data. You can also select data up here in the select data. So I'm going to add a series here. This is going to be named ice cream. Values here, we can select this little arrow here, and I'm going to go to here. So I'm going to select 1980, control shift down. We can select this arrow again. Now the Y values, when you have this little one here, I don't know why this is the case, but it's always been like this as long as I can remember. You have to delete that, and then you click the arrow, and we're going to add in our ice cream. So that's cell C4, control shift down, and then I can drop down that arrow again, and I can click OK, and I can click OK again, and you see that it has the ice cream to our plot. We have two different series. Now the user, whoever's looking at this plot, isn't going to know which of those lines corresponds to American cheese or ice cream, or even what they refer to at all. They're not going to know that either of those refers to cheese and ice cream. So it's nice to add in a legend. So you can go up here to the plus sign. Alternatively, you can go up here to the add chart element. So let's select from up here the legend, and I'm going to put this, let's just put this to the right. So there's our legend. We can format this. A lot of times I like to move the legend down, and I like to expand the chart so it takes up the entire figure. And I like to add in, I like to right click here and format this legend a little. If you go to this paint bucket, you can select the fill. I like to put in a solid fill of white. You add in a border. So I'm going to select the solid line, and I like that to be black. I would encourage you to mess around, kind of mouse around with these different formatting options so you know what's available. But I like to put this kind of in the lower right-hand corner or upper right-hand corner. But there is our nice scatter plot. Very self-explanatory. The user can look at consumption of American cheese and ice cream as a function of year. They can distinguish between the two lines, and it's nice and clean. Now I'm going to show you how to make column and pie charts. Column charts are generally used to visualize data in which the independent variable is categorical in nature. We still have the independent variable on the x-axis here, going horizontally, the dependent variable on the y-axis. With column charts and pie charts, we have categorical data. For example, people. People, you cannot plot that on a continuum on the x-axis. You might have countries here, and you're measuring the gross domestic product, or maybe departments of a store. In general, time series data is better represented on scatter plots unless it's categorical in nature, like monthly, quarterly, or yearly data. An example of where you might want to use a column chart would be if you had a bunch of states and you had their populations. You could easily represent this as a column chart. You can also put multiple series on a column chart. Perhaps you had a state here, but you wanted to add multiple series. We could put population on a primary axis, and on the secondary axis you might have the area in square kilometers. I'm also going to talk about pie charts. Pie charts are a good way to visualize categorical data. For example, the total sales here as a function of the salesperson. Like column charts, these are used to visualize data in which the independent variable is categorical. Unfortunately, you cannot plot multiple series easily using a pie chart. There are a couple of different types of charts known as donut plots and sunburst plots that do attempt to distinguish between different series. But for simple pie charts, you cannot plot multiple series. I've got an example file here called state data. We have a bunch of different states over here on the left. These are categorical in nature, and we have area, maybe the median gross rent, median household income, and population. Let's just go ahead and plot population as a function of the state. So I can select the states over here. I'm going to hold down the control key, and then I'm going to drag out the population there while holding down the control key. By the way, if you're going to be adding records, different states to the data here, you might want to convert this first to an Excel table. I can go up here to Insert, and you can go to Recommended Charts. I like to go straight up here to insert a column or bar chart. A column is a chart with vertical bars. A bar chart has horizontal bars. So whatever your preference is, you can select those from these different options here. So let's do 2D column. I can click on that, and I like to delete the title. This is a nice way to visualize things. And then maybe we wanted to visualize area instead. You can go back here, we can select data, and edit this. Instead of column E, I can just do area, click OK, and click OK again. Is a typical column chart. You can convert to a different type of chart. Select that chart and go over here to chart design, and I can do change chart type. Maybe we want to make this a pie chart, so I can click pie. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Now to add in a legend because this by itself is not very descriptive. We don't know which of these corresponds to which state. I can go up here to plus, and I'm going to add in a legend. Now we've got the various color coding relative to the state here in the chart. I'm also going to go up here in chart design. There's all sorts of different options that they suggest. And so I'm going to just kind of mouse around. I like this style for whatever reason. That one I really like. And if we don't like the legend up at the top, I can go over here to the left and I can go down here to legend. Maybe we want that on the right. This also needs a title. So I'm going to add a chart title because we don't really know what that is referring to. I can change this to population. And finally, maybe I want to add in data labels. I can go plus, and there's these data labels here. If you select on this arrow over here, it'll have a couple of different options that you can mouse around with. Maybe we want this little data call out. That's kind of nice because it has the states there right next to it. So I like this plot here. This is a really nice pie chart for showing categorical data. If we have a scatter plot here, I created this in a previous screencast. I can select, using these check marks up here, I can select which of those series I would like to display on this chart. So this is actually a dynamic chart. And so I'm going to show you how to make this in this screencast. You also notice that I have this on this, what I call kind of a dashboard. I'll be starting with this file called Dairy Products Dynamic Chart. It's essentially an intermediate in some of the work that I did in one of the previous screencasts. The first thing I'm going to do in order to make this dynamic, I'm going to put this chart on a separate sheet. So I'm going to insert a new sheet over here. I'm going to rename this real quick. I'm going to rename this dashboard because it's going to kind of be our summary page. The other thing I'm going to do is you can go up here to view and I'm going to deselect grid lines, and so everything's white. It's kind of a more professional style. And I'm going to cut this, Control X, go over here to dashboard, and I'm going to do Control V to paste it. I'm going to move this around a little bit. I'm going to remove this border by right-clicking Format Chart area, and I can just say no line for the border there. It's just personal preference, and I kind of like that look. Let's go back to sheet 1. In order to make this dynamic, the first thing we need to do, we need to copy this information. So I'm going to do Control Shift down all the way to the bottom, Control Copy, just kind of making a clone of this, and I'm just gonna put it over here, Control V. The next step is to delete the contents of this chart, and I'll show you why we're doing this here in a minute. But I'm gonna do Control Shift down, press the delete key, or you can right click clear contents, and I'm gonna go back to the dashboard. What we need to do now is we need to add in these the check boxes. So if you don't have the developer tab like I don't at the moment, we can go to File, Options, Customize Ribbon, and I'm going to make sure the developer tab is selected, and I can click OK. And now we go up here to the developer tab, and I'm going to insert in these form controls. There's a check box, so this little green check. So let's left click on that, and then you can kind of go over here and outline where it's going to go.
you can left click in here and you can change. So this is going to be American cheese. And then what I can do is I can right click on that and we can copy, and I'm just going to paste 3 more of those. And I'm just going to spend a minute or two formatting these real quick. So I've got those labeled, and let me show you a trick. You can put the left one kind of where you want it to be, the right one where you want it to be, and then I can hold down the control key and I can left click on these. If we go up here to the shape format menu, I'm going to align them all the top, so they're all top aligned, and then I'm going to go back to align and I'm going to do distribute horizontally. That just equally spaces them out, and so that looks pretty nice. Now what we need to do, these check boxes, the way they work is you can toggle them. I can click them on and off. The output, though, you need to specify an output cell, and it's going to return either a true if it's selected or a false if it's not. We can right click on this and I can do format control, and it asks us for this cell link. Now I'm going to go here and click that arrow. I'm going to go back to sheet 1, and for American cheese I'm just going to use the first row. This is going to be L1. So let's click OK down here. When I do this, if you select the check and we go back to sheet 1, you know the checkbox, either it's true or false, to govern what is going to be in this table, and then we're going to link the information in this table back to our dashboard here, to the data. So I'm going to right click on ice cream. I'm going to format this. Cell link is going to be equal to M1 over here, and I'm going to do this real quick for yogurt and butter using the other 2 cells adjacent to those. Okay, so now those 4 checkboxes are linked to cells L1 through O1, and if I make changes here to the status of these checkboxes, then that automatically is updated over here on our sheet 1. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use the status of that checkbox, false or true, to determine what is placed into these columns over here on the right. So I'm going to put a simple if statement. If, I can just say L1, and I'm actually going to toggle this to be relative column absolute row, so I can drag this down and the reference will always be row 1, and I can drag this over and it'll update to the column above it, to the row value up here above whichever we're looking at, ice cream, yogurt, or butter. So I'm going to do that, if that, and we can just say if that, because if it's true, then we have the second argument. If that's true, if it's been selected, we want to show American cheese over here, so I'm going to select B4. Otherwise, if that's not selected, we can use this function in Excel called NA, and that just will give us the NA error there. And I'll show you the importance of this here in a minute, but I can double click that down, and because of the way I set this up, I can drag this over to apply that if statement, and you see that because these 3 are true and the left one is false, we have the NA for American cheese, but we're showing the values there for the ice cream, yogurt, and butter. If I go back to the dashboard and I deselect yogurt, now that is false, N1 is false, and we have the NA. Let's apply this now to all of the different years, so I can double click on this down. I've got all the information now that I need. I can go back to dashboard and I can right click on here, select data, and now it's just a matter of updating the references. For example, American cheese, I can edit that. I still want the same X values, so if we go over here to the X values, I still want those are the same years, and I haven't changed those. But now instead of the Y values being in column B here, I want to use column L. So I would go in here, I'm going to update this to L4 to L40, and I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to do the same thing for ice cream, yogurt, and butter using columns M, N, and O respectively. Alright, so I've updated those references. So now instead of referring to the data on the left, I'm referring to the data on the right. Getting back to the reason why we put the NA in here, any series that says NA, any data with NA, if you try to plot that on a plot, it's not going to plot it. So right now we have false for American cheese and yogurt, and you notice here on the dashboard, because those are all NAs in those two columns, it's not plotting those. But if we go up and select American cheese, then you see it's the data back on sheet 1 is no longer NA. Because that's true, that's how we can tell Excel which of the series to plot. So this is a really nice way to make a dynamic chart in Excel, and I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching.